It's the NUKA-COLA Lounge, presented by the Triple S League.
There was a time when I didn't want girls to know I was into video games. But now it's like...
I think that was like high school days.
Yeah, exactly. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NUKA-COLA Lounge podcast. My name is Ash, and I'm here as always with Saib and with Maeve. Are gamers athletes? Does eSports belong in the X Games? That's one of the topics we're going to be discussing today, and we've got a couple of special guests who are very close to this issue who are going to be addressing it with us. If you're not already aware, there was a pro skier sent out a tweet this week saying, and I quote, "As athletes, sometimes we risk it all to win X Games. No gamer in the world deserves an X Games gold medal. Hashtag couch games, hashtag athletes only." Is she on track, or is she being prejudiced? Not wanting to have video gamers in the X Games. Well, joining us today we have Star Screen and Dino from the Ripple eSports team. They are competitive Dota 2 players. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and your team and what you guys do?
I'll go first. As you mentioned, I'm Dino. I'm one of the players of the Ripple eSports Dota 2 team. I was originally coming on as a coach, but now it's sort of like a coach-player sort of thing. And yeah, what we do at Ripple eSports, we just basically, at the moment, we're just practicing, because we're a fairly newly formed team. We formed only a couple weeks ago. So we're practicing at the moment and trying to get our heads into the scene and try and get our names known and whatnot. But about me, I do streaming on the side. I'm the Ripple eSports streamer now, as of a couple days ago. So I do that as well on the side.
Excellent. Starscreen, how about you?
I'm the captain of the team, and sometimes I play support and carry. Depends on which draft we do.
These guys are joining us via Skype from New Zealand, by the way. So is there much of an esports following in New Zealand?
There's actually quite a big following.
Yes.
Especially when you consider that there's only, 4.5 million population in New Zealand. We've actually got a pretty decent sports following, because I work for Aspect of Gaming as well, which is another, I suppose you'd call esports organization, which works more in running tournaments and stuff. And there's actually quite a lot of support in New Zealand and Australia for esports stuff. Like we do events, we get a couple hundred people showing up regionally, which is pretty good.
How long have you been involved in esports?
Myself, I've been involved, I think probably a good couple years now. Probably since the end of 2014, I started jumping into the esports scene for Aspect of Gaming and being creating tournaments, doing all that sort of stuff for a while.
And do you guys have any universities in New Zealand that are doing professional teams? Because you have that in the States now a lot, and even in Canada, we're starting to get some of the colleges and universities form up either Dota or League teams. And League of Legends and Riot has been very instrumental in pushing for that and getting credibility and stuff. Do you guys have that movement starting in any of your colleges that you're aware of?
Well, it's not so much. I mean, they're starting to show up over the past couple of years, but they're not really professional, I'd say. They're just friendly sort of tournaments or games within the university or across universities in New Zealand.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them, just like you wouldn't call like college sporting events are not big leagues by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly a good stepping stone for the industry as a whole, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Just giving a little bit of background, I tried to become my provincial representative, which I did score second place. They were sending 3 players to the capital in Halo 2. But I could not...
That's a while ago.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. That's like original Xbox long time ago. And nobody would give us funding. And like we would ask for funding and people wouldn't even they'd just laugh at us and not take us seriously at all. Whereas now it's a little bit easier, but it's still a little difficult. what's your general response when you're asking for like funding and stuff like that? Is it really difficult? Like back then I would call it impossible, and nowadays what's the comparison? Is it?
I think it's a lot easier these days because we know the people to talk to that are trying to support esports and gaming in New Zealand. They're all happy with it, and they set up connections for us. And we've got a group of companies that are trying to help get their name out there through the esports scene. So they're like sponsoring events and stuff. And we generally see the same names coming through as sponsors for a lot of events and tournaments. So funding wise, it's hard to get funding if you don't know who to talk to. There's not a lot, like in numerical terms, there's not a lot of sponsors or people out there willing to give grants for that sort of thing, but there are a few out there. You just sort of got to know who to talk to, really. So it can be hard.
Plus, you have to have a good profile for your Dota 2 team for them to get them interested.
So much can change in 12 years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. Well, you look at the rise of Twitch and YouTube gaming and things like that. Spectator gaming that wasn't a thing 10, 12 years ago.
It was in certain parts of the world. In Asia,
perhaps,
they
but it wasn't
still filled, theaters and arenas with that stuff there for StarCraft.
But it was obviously much more of a niche thing, whereas now it's become mainstream, and it's even becoming who was it? Jimmy Kimmel that took a jab at the YouTube Let's Players.
Yeah.
And then he had Markiplier on to talk about it, I believe.
Well, you even got UFC fighters streaming Twitch live games now as well.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it a bit more interesting.
It's getting more and more mainstream, which is really interesting, and it's really exciting, for us.
There's an event in the United States, which I'm going to plug here because I think it's a fantastic cause. It's Games Done Quick. They do 2 events every year. Awesome Games Done Quick and Summer Games Done Quick, raising money for a couple of different charities. And it is some of the biggest speedrunners from different speedrunning communities coming together for an entire week. They stream live 24/7 on Twitch, a speedrun marathon, raising money for the Prevent Cancer Society, and then in the summer they raise money for Doctors Without Borders. And they're getting over $1 million in donations per event now. It's amazing.
Wow, it's a lot.
Thousands and thousands of people watching on Twitch, and actually they're hitting the #1 spot on Twitch every time they're holding an event. Now they're constantly the most viewed channel on Twitch. So it's a mainstream thing, and it's being used not just for entertainment, but also for supporting some really good causes. So it's a great thing to see. It's a great thing as a gamer. At one time, I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but there was a time when I didn't want girls to know I was into video games. But now it's like...
I think that was like high school days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You just didn't want people to know you did that because you were a weirdo. But now...
I'd say charity definitely increases its
profile,
profile and status.
Public
One of my brothers routinely raises money for Extra Life, and originally that was a small thing, and now it's so big and massive that it's outdoing some of the charitable donations that pro sports teams raises for their various charities.
It's good that they're doing it because it gives them more recognition for them doing it as well.
So I have another question as far as esports before we get into this controversy thing. One of the things that I find very interesting about some of the upcoming games, especially Overwatch and a handful of other new gen, arena style games coming out. Some of the newer gen ones, they're getting rid of a certain aspect of personal stats, which I have always argued is pointless and is not good to have. And I'd like to have you guys' opinion on this. In Dota and in League, people's kills, they have deaths, and then they have assists. And in the new format that a lot of games are moving to in the second generation here that we've got coming up, you don't have kills anymore. All you have is team kills and personal deaths. Maeve, doesn't Here's the Storm do that as well?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
They
so
do very similar stuff, yeah.
So how do you guys feel about that? Like, do you think that's good or bad from a competitive sporting angle? Because I can tell you, and you probably know this, that when you're playing a pug game, a lot of puggers, just regular players, they're more concerned with their personal score. They could lose the game, but if they had a good personal score, then they think they're, the next best thing to slice bread, basically. What's your opinion on that?
I can see why they've done it like that. They've done it like that so that you try and work more as a team, because you look at your team kills, for example, and say, oh, well, we'll get more team kills if, I'm not getting the last hits or not getting the kills personally, but we're working together as a team to get them. But it's still making it sort of, it's your fault if you lose because it's showing your deaths, and it's like, it's sort of trying to make you work together more as a team, which is good. But personally, I'd still like to see your own stats and whatnot, so you can say that, yeah, I'm this good on this position or whatever. But in the end, it's only really an issue for public matches or for casual players, whereas in the competitive scene, you don't really care about your own kills anyway. You just care about how well the team is doing as a team. So yeah, I guess it's just different in two different environments.
Yeah. It's more of an objective game in the competitive scene than other than distant kills.
Yeah, and that's something that I was always annoyed with whenever I played any kind of team game, and you had one player who's like, I'm the boss, but you lost us the game. Well, I'm still the boss because I won. I had the biggest dick at the end of the day.
We're going to deal with that in amateur versus professional sports as well, right? You might have the guy on your team who, in your college or high school team, that thinks he's really hot stuff, and so he's got to showboat and get all the goals, but once you go pro, they don't respect that. I mean, it might be great, for the audience, but as a team, I don't think you'll make it too far if you're doing that kind of thing.
No, it's very hard when making a team, because you have to get the right players, not in the sense that they're good, but in the sense that they'll work together more than anything. That they'll work together and they'll actually fill out the roles and positions needed for the game.
Mm-hmm.
So you're Dota 2 competitive players. For people that aren't familiar with the game, how would you describe it from a competitive player's perspective compared to, say, League of Legends? What's
well, yeah.
I think the defining thing between the two games is the use of mechanics more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, both of them have heroes, both of them have a base you've got to destroy, both of them are 5-on-5, and both of them have maps that are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that makes Dota really different from League of Legends is the mechanics. And what I mean by that is the small things in the game. For example, you've got high grounds and low grounds. And high grounds is harder to hit people on the high ground if you're on low ground.
Mm-hmm.
You've got small number mechanics like how random chances are calculated, so the math behind that it can be different.
Okay.
You can have like pure randoms, pseudo randoms, and stuff. You can have different stats for items on ranged heroes or melee heroes. There's a whole bunch of things, but it's all these small things that you don't get to learn within your first year or 5 years of Dota. You're still learning them for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
It makes that game quite hard to get into, but
because I remember
it's what keeps me in the game.
Oh yeah, I remember. I played Dota when it was a part of Warcraft 3.
Oh yeah,
and it was great. This was man, what
the alt tab was real in that one.
Yeah.
It's quite funny because when we're playing Dota, I'll sometimes refer to what we're doing as mechanics abuse, where we're just using knowledge to beat the other team rather than playing better.
Yeah.
Before League went through its recent change, I'm moderate autistic, so I can crunch numbers on the fly in ways that most people can't, and so my big complaint when they changed it is like so much information got taken away. I couldn't run the same calculations at the same time, and it took me a little while to get used to it. So I can definitely appreciate the more math that you're running into in the middle of a game, the better and more challenging the experience. So I think you're right, and I think that's a interesting way of doing it.
It's strategizing, right?
Yeah.
It's not just using your raw skill.
It's strategy. It's also, and this is where I am definitely going to get into a strong stance against people who say it's not athleticism.
It is.
Your hand-eye coordination in a match, you're literally clicking on things that are millimeters and sometimes even pixels apart, and your ability to do it correctly can win you a fight or can lose you a fight, and that fight can then either win you or lose you the match as a whole. So, whereas you have, dart throwers and what's another really good example? Like, what do they call this spear chucking? What is that actually called in the Olympic sport? Javelin, thank you.
Javelin, yeah.
Yeah, javelin. I mean, there's still a lot of physical aspect to it, but I mean, your hand-eye coordination is basically the same hand-eye coordination that you're utilizing in certain video game aspects. And then the same thing immediately with hand-eye coordination is very important in hockey, in football. A lot of these things, if you can't throw worth a damn, you're not, like, if you just throw far, or in golf, you just hit the ball hard, that means absolutely nothing when you're aiming for a target.
Okay, but devil's advocate here. I mean, somebody's going to come along and say, oh, but, throwing a football is not even in the same ballpark. Sorry, no pun intended there. It's not even in the same, it's not nearly the same thing as, you're clicking your mouse on a screen. What would you guys say to that?
Well, definitely video games don't have a huge physical
lot of
aspect to them. But yeah, it's more of a sport on the brain than on your body. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Like, obviously, I'm not gonna be huge and buff from sitting behind the computer, but I think I keep seeing things with gamers, just these little side notes when I'm scrolling on Facebook or whatever, and it's just like gamers have a substantially lower reaction time or quicker reaction time than non-gamers, sort of thing. And that just goes to show that we're just really working more on the mind and working on the reaction speeds and constantly thinking about stuff. Whereas in a game I used to play hockey, field hockey, there's a bit of mind play to it, but it's just like, I need to hit the ball this way. And it's more physical where I have to hit it like this. Maybe I'll get some blood on me or something, but it's not as in like I need to be really quick. I need to get my reaction speed down to like 0.1 second. It's not like that sort of thing. So both of them are sports in their own sense, in my opinion. One's just a sport more on the mind than on the body.
I like to bring up, like, as an example, baseball, because baseball is not a very physical sport.
No, it's not.
Right? It's very, it's based on focus and, like you were saying, hand-eye coordination.
And even mind games, too. Right?
Have you guys ever played baseball?
No.
In primary school, yes.
What is this baseball thing?
I just found that... I see what Maeve's point is. I just find it funny. You'd say... Because I know when I've played baseball, I've been exhausted afterwards. But anyway.
Another sport that is very mind-heavy. Fencing, you don't have a lot of physically strong fencers that are dominant because they're physically strong. Your best attribute in a fencing match is your brain. And your reflexes are a close second, and strength is almost a non-factor. So again, it's a very similar kind of thing. So let's now kind of go into this here. One of these replies to this athlete, this skier, was from a guy who had become paralyzed because he used to be a professional snowboarder. He got paralyzed in an accident. He didn't say whether it was from snowboarding or whether it was from something else. But now he finds the ability to compete in video games, and to hear him say, hey, I used to be somebody who was qualified to be an X-gamer, and now I can't because I paid that ultimate price on the physical end, and now I can only compete in a brain way, and now you're telling me that's completely unwelcomed in your understanding. And now her arguments kind of, at first it went from, oh no, you guys don't deserve an X Games, which is weird because as a skier, you know, you have Olympics, you have national games, you have, you know, X Games, you have a lot of different places and times to get an award. The X Games is not the only place that you can pick up a medal for your ability to ski or snowboard. Conversely, she goes on to say that you know, just like, you know, hockey has its awards and football has, you know, what's this big football event coming up soon? I've heard a lot of talk about this, but I can never really. Maybe you were mentioning it earlier today. What is the Super Bowl? Oh, the Super Bowl. Oh, no, I'm kidding. You know, the Super Bowl. She goes, oh, football has a Super Bowl, but at the same time, like that seems a little one-sided, like unfair when she's talking about a sport that has multiple nationally recognized gold medal events versus hers, which has, you know, which is integrating more sports that are popular with the younger people. And now she's suddenly upset that there's a sport involved in it that's not a physical requirement sport. But, you know, there's a lot of games that are not fit. I seem to remember when Texas Hold'em was really, really popular on ESPN.
The World Series of Poker in it. I don't know, like, that'll probably be the same answer for, you know, because some of them consider that a sport as well.
Yeah.
I guess that is where it comes down to definitions. What is a sport? What makes something... Saib and I were talking about this the other day. We have games that are sports, like hockey and football, etc. Then you have sports that are not games, like gymnastics or like javelin. Well, I guess that might be kind of a game.
Trampolining, that's a fun one.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of a game, right? But a game, you tend to think of two opposing sides or more.
Yeah,
you know, in direct competition as opposed to
in direct physical competition, and you have that in eSports, in almost all of the eSports you're playing.
So well, and there's no argument that these eSports things are games, but are they sports? And what makes them sports? Like, what makes something a sport?
Mental warfare. eSports is a good mental warfare game.
Yeah,
strategy.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you enter that aspect, like, you can look at hundreds and hundreds of matches in the past 100 years. Some of the greatest wins in professional sports were wins because of the mental warfare that was applied, the brain-on-brain thinking. It didn't always come down to brawn. And that's where the argument kind of falls apart, because physicality is never, ever the winning goal.
It's never the only thing. It's never the one thing that's going to win you a game or a sport, you know, of any kind. You have to have that mental aspect as well. Yeah, for sure.
The whole argument just stinks of elitism, you know?
Yeah.
Like a little bit of we're better because we train physically kind of thing, and
you could argue that it's different, you know, and that it's a different sort of challenge, and it involves, but that's as far as it goes, you know, not necessarily better.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for. I'm a big fan of speedrunning. I mentioned the speedrun marathon earlier. I love watching speedrunners, and the dedication they have to shaving like 3 frames of time off of their run so that they can get the world record in a particular game.
Yeah.
Like Mario 64, I've been following for a couple years now, And I've watched the world record time go from like somewhere in the mid, an hour 45 down to like an hour 42 and then an hour 41. They just find new. I mean, we're talking about a game that's over 20 years old now, and they're finding new tricks and new ways to shorten the time that it takes to complete this game. And it blows my mind. I would not have the patience to do that.
Yeah.
And not to mention that where we're headed with technology. And I'd love to hear you guys' idea on this. You guys have seen you've obviously heard or seen about the Oculus Rift and whatnot, but the HoloLens is where you really start to blend reality with gaming, and it could very well be that we can have a national sport in 20 years that utilizes augmented reality. Instead of like, a soccer game or a football game, you could have like people throwing around like sci-fi or high fantasy skills on a field that's completely augmented with reality. And when you're watching it on TV, that's already fed into it. But when you're live, you're all wearing the goggles and you're all seeing like, holy shit, there's a giant dragon that the player's controlling. And, stuff like that, I think is where we could potentially see tech and the high end of tech, and then also physicality, and also the best of the mental warfare all coming together in the future.
Yeah. Well, the future of the world is technology, computers.
You would be able to get quite a mix, because not everybody that is competing in that kind of game necessarily needs to be physically perfect. In fact, you could have quite a few people who are paralyzed from the waist down or whatever, and they could still function as a very valid teammate. And I think that kind of brings things together and makes things more interesting. I'm definitely really, really stoked and excited for where technology in sporting events is going to be in 20 years. What's your guys' wild speculation on this?
Oh, that's not something I've really thought about. I suppose Oculus Rift has really paved the way and made the VR really popular now. My mates over at Leaping Tiger, I don't know if you heard them, I'll do a bit of promotion. They're a friend-finding app for gamers. But anyway, they have an Oculus Rift, which is quite cool. And the Oculus Rift makes you feel like you're in there quite well, but you still feel like it's a game. But as you were saying, if you have like the augmented reality thing, now
the HoloLens approach to it,
I feel like that would be very, very popular, because it's merging what people are sort of saying why esports aren't sports. It's like, it's not real. You're just sitting behind a computer. It's just a screen sort of thing. Whereas that sort of thing, you could even be doing physical activity in a way to do that. So it could be like the perfect medium between the two, which can make it really popular.
Mixing that physical prowess with the video gaming.
Yeah, that would be really cool. It'd be like watching Hunger Games in real life.
Yeah, you could do a Hunger Games style thing and have nobody have to die.
Actually die. Because every weapon
No one
that
wants
you're
to die.
shooting or every attack that you're making is artificial in physical nature. So you still rip off somebody's head, but not actually rip off their head. So it's either that or I don't know if you guys watched that movie, what was that Bruce Willis movie about the androids that everybody piloted around?
Yes, I saw that.
There was a sporting poster in the background. And to my knowledge, I don't think they ever showed it, but you did see several images of it, and it was like football gone like gladiator. So you still have the football, but like people could like kill the other players' robots by like tearing their heads off. And the one of the poster pictures was like the guy holding the ball in one hand, and then the head of one of the severed androids in his other hand, with like a bit of like the spinal thing coming out from dragging on the ground. I was like, yeah, I could see how that could definitely become popular once players shifted to piloting androids. But,
Surrogates. Surrogates is what the movie was called. And I always wondered, watching that movie, because the whole premise was, oh, you're free from physical harm, so it was no big deal if your surrogate gets busted up. But I was wondering the whole way through, who is paying for all this stuff?
Yeah.
Where he beats up the guy who's just laughing at him.
Come into it.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess they.
And that's completely true. Is like, once you create an augmented reality, then, you're just sitting behind basically a wall and a real wall and controlling things in a virtual scape. But being able to do it with augmented reality, you can actually have like players on a field, and as long as they're wearing their goggles, they're seeing the virtual reality, and the fans are also watching that. Then you enter a whole different perspective of gaming and reality, and it'll be very, very fascinating to see before we get into like a full dive system, which is probably another 50 years away.
Did you guys know that Bruce Willis's first name is Walter?
Holy shit!
Is it?
Walter Bruce Willis is his full name.
He could have been a British gentleman. Imagine
that. In an alternate reality, he's on Downton Abbey sipping tea.
So yeah, any other thoughts to throw in for this skier who believes that athleticism is physical based only? Any other thoughts, anybody?
I didn't know how she could even think that, because wherever your mind goes, your body does too.
I can sort of see her point. Being the X Games was made for it's extreme gaming, right?
Yeah.
For extreme games, and especially the viewers will be expecting, like motocross and skiing and all kinds of stuff like that, where people could actually hurt themselves pretty badly. So in that sense, I feel like it'd be a bit of a surprise to see gaming event there, especially without the viewers somehow knowing that's going to be there. You can't integrate it, but you can't just slap it in there. So in that sense, I can see her point. But
X Games did kind of slap it in last minute, but the way that they did it was a little bit questionable. But at the same time, it's like it brought up the viewers on the
oh yeah,
for the game itself. So you got to say somewhere in there, yes, because honestly, I can't remember the last time I watched a skiing match. If I were actually at the X Games, because I was interested in seeing them, which up until now I haven't really been, but I'd catch most things that I could. So that includes probably skiing. I might actually pull in a little bit of skiing instead of just watch what I want to watch, which is what happens when you're sitting in front of your TV. You just kind of watch whatever you want to watch, and then when something boring comes on, you're like, screw this.
I think that a lot of people worldwide even aren't aware yet of how popular esports are becoming, like how big it is now. Because I think the League of Legends World Championship, the recent one, it was watched by 70 million people.
Yeah,
it's huge.
It's huge. Like that's bigger than any other sport, except for maybe, like you're mentioning, maybe the Super Bowl. But since it's accessible on the internet, it's anyone can be a part of it, right? And I think it really is the new big thing. I think for a global sports entertainment, I think it's just beginning. Even though it's huge already, it's gonna go places. I think.
Yeah, it's gonna go real far. I think some people just don't believe in esports, just the fact that it's a game.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a game, but what else is just a game? Well, let's see, hockey.
Yeah, exactly.
Soccer, football. So the same thing depending on where you live. But yeah, games, that's what I realized when I really came into my own identity as a gamer. I don't know, for some reason, like I pointed out earlier on in my life, I almost used to see it as a shameful thing to be into video games. It was sort of drilled into me that they're not worthwhile, they're not
You can't go anywhere
You
with this
should
sort
be
of
a
thing.
Yeah.
carpenter.
So there's
I don't know if you guys have seen, but Valve released a movie a couple of years ago called Free to Play, which was about the journey of the professional players.
Yeah, I watched.
And one of them had the mother, Clinton Loomis, his mom, was always telling him, you should probably go out, get a real job. Gaming's probably not going to be working out for you, Which is funny because it's not what happened, but it's generally what happens because they see it as, it's not something that's really approved of.
It hasn't
Especially
been.
more in Western society than other societies, but it's turning around now a bit.
It's becoming acceptable to be a gamer. It's becoming acceptable, even sort of appreciated to be a bit of a geek in many areas of life. And I mean, shows like The Big Bang Theory. Do you guys get that over in New Zealand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shows like that. It's becoming more acceptable to be into these kinds of things, to be into sci-fi, to be into...
It's like Joss Whedon, right? It's the Joss Whedon effect.
Joss Whedon is... Yeah,
12 years ago, Joss Whedon was like being ostracized from certain networks for being, you're way too nerdy. Who would watch something about vampires? You're stupid. And then 12 years later, we have this. He's the director of one of the highest grossing series of all times. He's directing all this new stuff, and then as far as like vampires itself goes, it's one of the highest earning genres right now in media. Like, let's stick to that Cheers concept. Yeah, just the guys in the bar sitting around complaining about their wives. Yeah, because that's what everybody wants to go for.
That's
these
what
days.
they want to watch, right?
It's funny to see how the changes how changes are so slow. So, turning to some newer news, did you guys get a chance to see the Division beta that came out last week?
I did see that it came out, but I haven't read anything into it, really.
Okay. And what else? What else is out recently?
Speaking of eSports and sporting matches, Lazer Team. Did you want to bring that up now? I thought that was
going to
a clever
segue into that before you rudely interrupted me.
I just did segue into it. All right, you do it your way, and then I'll just make sure.
Did you guys have a chance to grab in last? It was about 2 weeks ago. Did you guys get a chance to see, or do you know very much about Lazer Team, the movie that just came out?
No, I looked into it last night. It looks. Is that sort of a comedy movie?
Oh yeah, it's a comedy.
Oh, it's definitely a comedy. Are you guys familiar with Rooster Teeth's material?
No.
Red versus Blue.
Red
Ruby,
versus Blue, yeah.
And they've
good.
So the Ruby,
I was really
they're
worried.
the.
I was going to take your nerd card away there for a second.
So
Everyone's seen Red versus Blue.
their first project was Red versus Blue. Then they moved on for a few more machinima stuff. Now they produce Ruby, and The No is one of their shows, the YouTube series The No. And now they are moving into feature films and television series, which it's amazing to see how far they've come. We started watching Red vs. Blue in its first season, didn't we?
Yep.
I remember being between seasons and just being like, when are they going to make more Red vs. Blue? And now to see them put together a feature film is just, it's fascinating to see how far they've come. And to see all of the recognizable faces, and more so the voices, because that's how you identified the characters in Red vs. Blue, was partly by the color of their armor, but mostly by their voices, because sometimes they looked very similar. So every time I hear Bernie Burns talk, I just hear church.
Yeah, me too.
How about other games? Are you guys looking forward to anything?
Well, looking forward to the new UFC game.
Sort of general esports question. So these games like League of Legends and Dota are big in esports. Are there any other genres of games that have a following in esports?
So the big one is probably like the MOBA, the Battle Arena sort of one, which is like where LoL and Dota and all that is situated in. But there's also Counter-Strike Go has become pretty big, which is a first-person shooter. Mm-hmm. You've probably heard of it.
Yeah.
There's also smaller games as well that are starting to crop up, especially Rocket League, I've noticed, has quite a good following. Because it's kind of just like... I mean, I haven't played it personally, but it's kind of like a football match, right? Like a soccer match, but like with deadly cars and stuff.
That would be awesome to see an augmented reality in an actual...
Oh, that would be scary to play in an augmented...
Well, if there's no... Well, we're talking about guys controlling their vehicles remotely, right? But then...
Yeah, but you would still feel like you're there.
That'd be pretty insane because, I mean, there's flips and crashes and it would be beautiful. What are you guys' thoughts on some of the new versions of the MOBAs? We're talking about Overwatch, and then what's that other one that starts with a P, Maeve?
Paragon?
Paragon, thank you.
I was just looking at that the other night.
Yeah.
Paragon and
Looks
Overwatch.
interesting.
And then there's Battleborn, and then there's three of those types of first person or slightly third person MOBA games coming out. Are you guys going to be keeping your eye on any one of those in particular?
I was looking at Paragon like the other night. It looks pretty interesting, but I feel like it's more... I mean, because I haven't played it because it's in beta at the moment, but looking at the videos and stuff, it looked more of a first-person shooter than like a strategy sort of game. I mean, there's still strategy in it, of course, but it's mostly on your personal skill by the looks of it. But it looks fairly interesting, and I hope it doesn't turn into one of those MOBAs that are just made purely just to bring in money, because those MOBAs generally...
Yeah.
Like they have microtransactions, and
Yeah.
it sort of turns away from a game.
Yeah,
Because I've always liked those games that have been like made from the developers, like made for the gamers as gamers, and they just want to make a good game. Because those games always succeed really well.
Yeah, I don't think any game that tries to sneak in pay for power or pay to win microtransactions, the minute that they throw those in, that game is immediately off my list of skill-based games. It's not even in the category anymore. It's moved over to a trash heap of consumer cash grab games that have no basis in skill or reality whatsoever,
and have no place in fair competition either.
Anyways, we've gone a bit long, so any closing thoughts on anything?
Shout out to Hani and Adrian, the co-founders of Ripple eSports.
Do you guys have a website or any online content, like videos or anything like that we can go see?
They have Twitter, so at Ripple eSports is their Twitter, and they have a Facebook / Ripple eSports as well. They don't have a YouTube yet, but they are working on that, and they don't have a website yet, but they are working on that as well.
I searched you guys on YouTube the other day, and I did get a few hits for Ripple eSports. It was like such and such team versus Ripple eSports in something. Was that you, or was that somebody else?
I have some uploaded to my YouTube channel because that was my tournament that I ran a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so we can, if anyone's curious, they can search Ripple eSports on YouTube, and you can see these guys in action. So, yes, well, this has been an excellent discussion. Thanks so much for joining us, Star Screen and Dino.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate your time.
As you guys are going out, I'm wondering, what's your opinion of Lady Beard?
Lady Beard?
Yeah, he's an Australian, so I figured he's been in the news a lot lately, and interested in your thoughts on him.
I haven't.
He's got to type it in.
Oh, all right. I've just googled it now. Is this guy wearing a tutu and stuff?
Yep.
It's hot.
As soon as he said it, I googled it straight away and I couldn't stop laughing.
You gotta listen to his music. It's even better.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Those things help us out a lot. Also, join us over at Sugar Bombed for community, discussions, and gaming news.